What's up, Theory and Theology? It's the day after 420. I kind of wanted to talk about some interesting ideas related to migrants. Um, these are not any kind of, there's not like a lot of accurate backing for what I'm about to say. I'm just talking. But I do want to talk about, some of the content I've just been consuming. Now it's mostly through YouTube, almost exclusively through YouTube, I believe. There are some YouTubers that are in places near, they go near Texas, near Chicago. They interview a lot of the migrants, and these are, you know, videos that are kind of recent. So I want to talk about some of the quality or lack of quality that we see, and something that I saw in a Dr. Phil video clip. It was kind of hard to piece together, but maybe I want to talk about that one first. So this Dr. Phil video had this, they first interviewed this farmer, an African American guy, who owns farmland, and there's other farmland that tends to come up for auction. And he mentioned there are trends, I don't know how much, this is one person mentioning this, that there are trends that there are a lot of Chinese buyers. Now, this isn't meant to be racist towards Chinese. I just want to talk about the work ethics, the business modalities, the business methodologies that I see, some of the things that I don't like. I'm not saying that the U.S. is perfect. I mean, like, clearly, we have a homelessness issue that's, a lot of it's part of a systemic issue, so I can't say we're perfect. We have a lot of people living below the poverty line, and we've had issues in our country forever with a lot of racial oppressions and all kinds of, I'm not even going to get into it, but we're not a perfect country. So I'm not going to sit and say the U.S. government is doing it better. Who knows? Maybe with the Chinese and other migrants, and with the Chinese buyers, big companies buying out land, and factory companies, and farming related industry kind of companies for, like, say, like animal feed, or like farming supply, equipment and things like that. They might make it better. I don't really know. I can't tell the future. Maybe they do have a method that will help more people get employed, that will help more people get, job opportunities in those areas. Maybe they'll hire Americans. Maybe, they will have to follow the rules in the United States of work hours and benefits and things like that. Maybe they will have to do that. It's just I haven't seen any historical proof of that with businesses that have been opened by Chinese business owners in the U.S. I've only seen versions of that have not gone well, have not gone in the favor of the U.S. residents. But it seems like the companies are profitable, and they can hire their own workers from their own countries. And the idea in China of like people know that I'm kind of, I've dabbled a lot in like drop shipping and, AliExpress and Alibaba and all these like uh, companies in China that they are also drop shipping companies, but they are in contact with these factories or companies where people make things. They make all kinds of things: iPhones, earbuds, headphones, laptops, you name it, smartwatches, fans, workout equipment, heaters, vape pen batteries, pretty much a lot of the stuff we can buy in the US comes from China. And we mark it up and make a profit. But they make, I don't know if I would say the majority of the stuff that we buy, but it feels like it. It really feels like it. Most of the stuff you buy online, and especially when it's like these cheap companies, like Temu and all that, a lot of Amazon stores too, a lot of it's made in China. When you go down and look at the manufacturers, a lot of it's China. And a lot of times when I'm selling stuff or reselling stuff and I have to put in the manufacturer information like on eBay or whatever, and I find out, oh, it's from China, you know, it's very rare that I find things from other places. It's very rare. So I guess what I'm trying to say, when you look at what Dr. Phil's video said about the Chinese people coming over, or the Chinese business people maybe hiring someone to purchase land, that this man was saying he could get like an acre in like about the $3,000 range, and they're marking it up to like 15,000 once they buy it. That's what they want to sell it at. So this American man was explaining, typically when you have a farm, you want farmland that's kind of adjacent to yours or somewhere nearby so that you can farm it. And you wait for like an acre, a couple acres to open up, and when you have the money, you buy it when it's available, especially if it's close enough to you, which makes sense, right? You want something nearby. Preferably like bordering what you already own. He's saying that Chinese people are hiring American people to bid on at these auctions, and they're outbidding the Americans and buying the property, the land itself. They're doing the same thing for, companies that are related to farming. So it sounds like animal things for animal care, food, feed for the animals, equipment to work the farms. And these are becoming Chinese-owned companies. Now, is this just in his area? I don't know. I don't know. But they show this map, the U.S., and they show a bunch of the countries, a bunch of the states in the U.S., and, they're kind of tallying up which of this land that the Chinese have purchased is close to military bases, and what equipment and weaponry and all kinds of things are there. But not all of it. Not all the land is near military bases, and it seems to me like most of the land is in California. Most of the land purchased is in California. There's some other, scattered around Texas and like the East Coast and the Midwest. It's all over. The land they purchased is all over, but it seems like, according to that map, the biggest chunk that I saw looked like it was in California. But California is a gigantic state. But it also has a lot of resources and farmland. California, the weather is ideal for farming, and a lot of produce is grown in California. Um, I mean, California is almost the whole West Coast, of the U.S. Almost. I mean, so um, I don't really know what the strategy is, but part of me is like, well, if they have the capital and it's not illegal, then why can't they buy it? Now, another part of me is maybe suspiciously thinking, is any of this related to the Chinese migrants coming? Now, I've been binge watching these videos every so often of migrants crossing into certain borders and all this stuff. Like, it's not illegal for them to do it. They come in, there's like border patrol right there. They walk up to the border patrol and tell them, hey, I'm seeking asylum, or whatever it is that they say that they're seeking refuge from. And border patrol takes them to some type of shelter like system or some type of facility type place where they get not just Chinese but other people, people from Africa, people from South America. I mean, there's people coming literally from all over the place. The borders are open. It's not like I mean, are they illegally crossing? Yes. But are they being stopped from crossing? No. It doesn't seem like it. According to these videos, I could be wrong, but it seems like they're just walking right in to different holes and different known areas. Now, I'm not saying that it's safe. I mean, people are getting, unfortunately, like harassed and raped and robbed and killed, and there's risk involved. They're getting all their money taken. There's a lot of horrific stories that I've heard. So there's a big risk dealing with these cartels, dealing with these people, with this system that's taking them across, because the Chinese people are coming through multiple countries. They're not, I mean, other people from South America are too, but it's a little shorter of a route. But I guess the difference with the Chinese people is some of them are flying some of the distances and all this kind of stuff. So there is a different, like, economic, maybe an economic status or ability to get either like loans or money from maybe family or friends who are supporting these people traveling. And I'm not trying to pick on Chinese people. It's just they're one of the categories that I'm curious about. It's more of a curiosity right now, and I'm trying to see if I'm accurate in trying to link these things together. Because what I've learned from those videos with some of the migrants that are coming from China, it sounds like there's some amount of wealth sometimes, maybe all times, but sometimes, that gets them into the US. And then a lot of them, not all, but a lot of them are seeking, religious freedom, or at least that's what they state, and they're going through sites that connect them to these church sites. Now, some of these sites charge them $1,500, $7,000 or so, and some of these sites take their money and try to get them some type of placement somewhere, somehow. I don't know what this placement looks like, but it tries to get them like work and jobs and different types of things. So I'm wondering if the Chinese, land purchasers and business purchasers who are coming and purchasing land are making it available for the migrants coming over to have some place to set up a new life, set up factories where their people can work, set up, places where people can farm, and they're going to be in charge of all of this, and they're still going to sell it back to the American people. Now, my main complaint, I was talking to a friend saying my main complaint is my experience with China and their products is that they don't always make high quality products. There seems to be a bit of scheming. I mean, I know we have genetically modified foods. I've seen those videos about Kentucky Fried Chicken and all that. I can't imagine if we had even worse quality foods, or like that pink slime that they use at McDonald's and all that. I mean, imagining something equal or worse quality than that. I mean, because KFC and McDonald's are just two spots and they're already bad quality. I know what it feels like to eat good quality food, organic food, compared to non-organic food, you know, just gross, you know, hot dogs, you know, vegetables that don't ripen properly, either don't ripen properly or don't, they're just not good quality. Now, I kind of do want to try something else. Because a lot of times when people are speaking on these topics, you know, the only thing they focus on is like the doom, the gloom, the fear. You know, is China trying to, you know, they could strategically start a war with us and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, I'm not saying it's not likely or not possible, but I don't really want to put my focus there. I want to put my focus on what are they planning? Maybe they're planning some kind of war type thing, but is that the only option? Is that the only option? I mean, looking at their situation, right? I mean, this Dr. Phil video mentioned, you know, look at the last few years, or I don't know how long, but if you look at some of the time periods between COVID, right, the pandemic, their shutdown and lockdown was far different than ours. Like in the US, there were a lot of states that just kind of, like I think Florida and some other states just kind of did their own thing, right? I was in a state where, you know, in California, I don't really remember the timeline, and let's be real, like I don't really remember it. We did lock down for a while, but it wasn't multiple years like that. I do know people who were collecting checks, not able to work for quite a while, and it seemed to be good money. I also know some people that suffered from, you know, not having enough, having to get on, you know, food stamps and stuff. So not everybody was getting checks. Not everybody who was forced out of work was getting checks that were like these beefy, nice checks monthly. I personally know people that suffered, but there were things in place, like with the rent, maybe, that seemed, okay, I'll say during the time, it seemed like it was helpful, but the aftermath doesn't seem like it was helpful, because I see people who went back into work, all of us who went back into work, the jobs weren't the same, the quality wasn't the same. Most sites I know weren't giving a lot of raises that could meet the inflation. So I can't really fully say that, you know, once the pandemic was over, you know, things were better. Like there was a point where housing was cheaper, everything was cheaper, and then everything just inflated way past what it was, but the pay rates weren't evening out with what the cost of living was, and they still have not. And so that's kind of what I've seen just on the surface, is that, you know, in the US that hasn't really evened out. Will it? I don't know. I think the only way for it to even out is either work experience wise, education wise, saving wise, or just moving. You know, people who live in expensive cities, those are the decisions they're having to make. Do I just get more education and get different certifications and degrees and trainings that can bump up my pay rate? Can I, you know, stay working in the same field? That's kind of my situation right now. Stay working within the same field that I've been working in relatively within psychology and case management, and just move and shift into different positions, because that, you know, my whole plan was to get work in tech, but it doesn't seem, I mean, just building that portfolio is taking a lot longer than I thought it was gonna take. Now I did learn a new method that people were saying, you know, there's one guy who did this study who was doing job applications, and he applied for, I think, 5,000 jobs. I don't remember the number, but it was in the thousands of jobs. And I think just the classic application with the resume, he heard back from a very small percentage, versus when he did that same classic application with a video, like a video interview, like a, I don't know what you call it, when you send like a video of yourself talking about your experience and things like that, as well as information about his portfolio. He sent a portfolio of his work, his past work, and that got him a lot of interviews. Now, I never tried that specific method, but it sounds like that's the method that works. At least in his study with his field, and I can't remember what the field was. But that's not a method that people are really taught, but that seems to be the method that worked. And, you know, that takes a while. It takes a long time. He had to hire out people or use a team of people to do this for him, to do the applications. With Indeed and LinkedIn, you kind of get, after like 100 or something, 120 or something applications, you get kind of like, oh, you can't apply to more than this. And so they'd have to, like, you know, clear their cache of cookies and like change browsers and stuff just to be able to like do this with only his information. And they were sending out all these applications, and it took days for a team of people. It took days to do this. And I don't know if it was 3,000 or 5,000, but it was a lot of applications. But really, I mean, if you have to work, realistically, how long is it going to take you to get to 5,000 applications and that many interviews? But he got a lot more interviews with that more beefed up version of, you know, of applying. But that takes way longer. And it's not just clicking easy apply and just like clicking a couple buttons and sending it. It's like you'd have to literally make a video response and a, you know, portfolio. It might have to be like geared more personally towards each site. There might be stuff that you can kind of tweak on there, that you could kind of alter, like have like a template of like a basic video, and then add maybe some extra stuff at the beginning or the end. So that would involve video editing and things like that. But either way, it's a lot. It's a long process. So realistically, just to level up, that might be what somebody new to a field has to do. He's not new to the field. He has like 5 years of experience, I think. Or no, he had an entry-level resume. That's what it was. An entry-level resume with a year of experience, I think it was. And his portfolio was built on a year of experience, and his resume and everything. And maybe it was like a Loom video or something like that. So most people aren't taught to apply like that. Most people don't apply like that. But I'm thinking in his particular study, maybe it's his field. But maybe it's, you know, if other people do that in their fields, maybe they would be lucky to get work at an entry level uh, job that might pay more, because some fields just pay way more. That's just how it is. And so maybe that might work. I mean, it's only one person. It's only one person that I've seen. I mean, I haven't searched this out, but going by just one study, I don't know if that's, something that you can say, okay, others can repeat this. I would say if other people are doing this and then you start seeing a trend that people are getting more interviews that way, basically what I'm trying to say is, how do you get to a place where you can afford things? There are methods to get there, but a lot of it, for the classic American, a lot of people rely on other companies to hire you. A lot of Americans rely on applications and getting hired by other companies. That's why I was mentioning last time, about, if you're trying to start your own thing, there is risk involved, but it's like you also don't have to deal with a lot of the other issues that come with, trying to kind of deal with the system. Like I know how much I should be getting paid. And the difference between what the job roles pay in San Diego compared to Los Angeles, I mean, it's almost like a $10 an hour difference, just about. Like probably like a seven to maybe $11 or $12 difference an hour. Of the offers I've gotten. And even that higher offer, in San Diego still doesn't afford me the amount of money I need to kind of live without roommates. Within a drivable distance. I mean, I could move to like Yuma or like, somewhere that's like super far away. But if I want to be within even like a 30-40 minute drive, which is still pretty far, but if I want to be within a 30-40 minute drive, even North County, you really can't, on a single person's income, I've said it before, making under 40 an hour, you're gonna have to either not save for retirement, like I'm talking like after taxes, because California taxes are so expensive, and I've got student loans, and so, if I don't buy a car and don't, rack up any kind of expenses, I'd be barely scraping by, maybe if I got a cheap apartment. But the car is going to become an issue. I already know that. So those are the kinds of decisions that, I'm faced with, and I'm kind of in a more flexible position than most people I know, because I have, African parents that don't really mind if I live with them or not. They actually prefer me to live at home, so that's kind of not really an issue. Now, I'm not taking advantage of that. I don't know. It's a cultural thing. I know a lot of people who are maybe like Americans who don't have that kind of mindset look at it weird. But it's a cultural thing. There are many cultures, I have friends who are Armenian, friends who are Middle Eastern, friends who are Latino, friends who are Indian. A lot of them, living at home is not strange. It's strange for Americans, but it's not strange for a lot of different cultures. And so that's just something that, a lot of people might need to understand that. I mean, it's some people might be like, oh, like you're living with your parents and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, but it comes with a cost. Like, you don't just live with your parents and live your life freely. Like, you live with your parents, so you're back with your parents' rules. There's certain stuff I can't do. I can't grow weed here, even though it's legal to do it. I can't do that. I can't have friends over. I can't have guests over. I can't have people overnight. I can't have barbecues in the back. Even if I do have friends over, there's no privacy. We can't like really have an open conversation without somebody overhearing it. We couldn't just have a kickback in the backyard and have a bonfire without other people like knowing, you know, what we're catching up about and all that kind of stuff. So there is a level of involvement that I don't like at all. That, you know, living with my parents, you know, I can't really independently just live. It's like, yeah, maybe the finances are a lot more flexible, but, you know, I'd prefer, you know, to just live without that. You know, that's why I was trying to kind of buckle down and live with those wild roommates, because I was like, you know, I was at least able to fully do what I wanted at all times without having to live by someone else's values and morals and things like that. Like I'm not really big on, you know, I don't really care if things have profanity. I don't really care if people want to drink or if I want to drink or smoke or whatever. Like, to me, those things, you know, maybe it's not the healthiest, you know, but, you know, in moderation, you know, you're not like doing damage really. And so I don't really see anything wrong with it. To them, it's like they're total like, oh, complete sobriety, and like, you know, they've got their own ways that I don't really have the same, I don't value that same way of doing things. So I kind of have to compromise some of my own freedom, and it does impact, you know, it impacts me emotionally. It's not, you know, I don't feel fully happy, just because it really impacts my social life and it impacts a lot of other things. And so I do know the benefits and, you know, the blessing that it is and the positive aspects that come with it, but it's not fully my cup of tea. So I think a lot of times, you know, people always think the grass is greener, right? It's like someone can see, oh, you're living with your parents, that sounds like it's great. It's like, nah, I'm not fully comfortable living here. You know, I'm just living here because it's financially comfortable, so that I can save and move forward a little bit more than what I would be able to do just paying every last cent towards rent and, you know, living expenses. At least some of it's cut down. But that's one method if people have that option. And then other than training and other things like that, or leveling up or moving, you know, moving from expensive areas to move somewhere way cheaper. I mean, a lot of these places are becoming saturated with Californians, New Yorkers, you know, and that's going to change, you know, the politics of areas and things like that. With different people moving to different places, it's going to change, you know, racially, culturally, how things are. So for Americans, that's kind of what we have to decide. Is like, I feel like there kind of are options, but a lot of us might not want to take them. Like, that's kind of how I feel. I could be wrong on that, but I do feel, you know, if you want to move to like rural, wherever the heck, you know, I mean, those people living in those areas, in the cheapest of areas, it's still expensive for them. So there are always going to be people who can't afford to go somewhere cheaper. But I think a lot of us in the more saturated cities, the bigger cities in the U.S., you know, even though we're like, oh, it's more expensive, we can move. We can move to these cheaper places, and it's going to be way, way cheaper, you know. I mean, I've still got cousins in the Midwest that aren't even paying $1,000 for rent. Like, out here, even renting a bedroom, sharing a house with people, it's almost unheard of to rent something in the hundreds, like $800, $700. Like, maybe now you can probably rent like 800, 900, maybe. I haven't really looked, but at one point it was like 1,000 or something just to rent. So it's kind of hard. And living with roommates and housemates, I feel like it's gotten worse. The quality of people that you have to live with, like, people are stressed, people aren't managing their physical and mental health, and they're acting wild, and then you get stuck living with them. So I don't think that's always the best of options. But I don't really know. A lot of these are kind of my opinions. I could be wrong on a lot of this. But going back to, like, the migrants, you know, they do have risk involved. It's not like they just come here and, I mean, the way people make it sound like is, oh, they come here, they can get like this $1,500 card of money on it. I've seen places where people can go to these buses that are set up. There's buses set up where the heat is on and people can, like, sleep in the buses. These big, like, tour buses, charter buses, that have security around them. There's places that are shelters that don't look like they're up to code. I've seen places with no windows, no ventilation. They talked about some kind of measles outbreak. And then some of the migrants that weren't Chinese migrants, some of the migrants were talking about how they had to get vaccinated from some of these other types of illnesses. And I don't know how I feel about vaccinations, but who knows what they were getting vaccinated with or for. So I would say, in a way, I do recognize that they're in a vulnerable position. Like, basically, they're homeless. They come here homeless, having to rely on an unpredictable U.S. system. But for them to take that risk, what they were coming from, how much worse was it, you know? People talk about women having, like, anchor babies, that they have a baby that's born in the U.S., meaning that they traveled pregnant. You know, people who are homeless, American citizens, you know, not feeling like they actually are getting displaced more than they already were, because the shelter services in some of these places are being prioritized. You know, the migrants are being prioritized. But it's a difficult topic. You know, it's just a difficult topic. The migrants getting prioritized. The I guess people talk about the crime, or just like that, you know, there's this unsuspected just this unknown level of things that's kind of going on. Just what do you do or say to it? You know, it's unknown. They're getting bused or flown to certain different states now, and just put places. I have heard of some people being able to get some type of housing, but I guess my big question is, how much is their rent and how are they affording this? Can they even work? And it doesn't sound like it's always one family getting a house. It sounds like it's multiple families sharing these housing places. I don't know. Like, there are a lot of unknowns, because part of it I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe this isn't fair. They're taking resources from Americans. Maybe this isn't fair. They're taking resources from, you know, homeless Americans. My belief since the pandemic has been that people can be off the streets. It's possible because I've seen it. Um, I was in San Diego at the time where they had placed the homeless people in hotels. Like if you tested positive for COVID or had a symptom and you called a certain line, at the minimum you'd be at a hotel for, I don't remember, don't quote me on this. It was either 1 week, 2 weeks, or 3 weeks. You'd be at a hotel and then they just kind of push you back onto the street. But there were other people, and I know this through work because I was working with these populations of people. There were other people that stayed more steady in these hotels. Now, they had complaints. You know, a lot of these people had kids that were stuck in the hotels. Um, the kids were getting all kinds of sicknesses. I can't remember if it was like ringworm, just different kind of things that some of the kids were contracting. They're like, the adults were telling me that these hotels weren't like that well cleaned, not very well vacuumed. The sheets maybe weren't as clean, the towels weren't as clean, and they couldn't really take tub baths for their kids because they felt like it was not clean. Now, not everybody was telling me this, and they were living at hotel sites where there were maybe elderly placed there as well. Different vulnerable populations were placed. Some people were passing away. And so it's not like it was perfect for these homeless people. They were getting food, but it was like the same food every day in those kind of like styrofoam containers, being fed the same meal every day, to a point where like the kids were like gagging, because you know how kids can be. They can be a little picky. I think naturally, it's hard for some kids to kind of eat the same thing all the time. It would be like the same like eggs and whatever, like in a styrofoam container, and they couldn't really. I think the nurses had to contact them every day, and they had to report their symptoms to these nurses every day. I think there was someone else who came by almost every day in person to check on like the wellness of the kids or something. I really can't remember all the details. And then a lot of times they weren't really allowed to go too much outside unless they were like, maybe if they were allowed to play in the parking lot. But these are like little kids, they're rowdy, and so it's like they didn't really have space to play. There would be security at these places, and the clients, when I would meet them, we would meet like curbside, like outside the facility, like outside like a hotel parking lot sidewalk, because I couldn't go in, and I didn't want to, and they had to come outside, and I couldn't really be on the property without permission. I think I had to sign in to be there. There was like sign-in sheets and stuff, and like, so it was a whole different thing. But there were more placement options, but then people did get pushed out onto the street, and the services that were supposed to help people, they kind of did fib and lie a lot to push people into shelters and kind of force them to go, and just took their stuff out, put it into, some of the people got their stuff put into moving vans without their permission, and the stuff was moved to certain locations and put in storages where they couldn't locate their stuff, their clothes, their underwear, their medicine. They didn't have a key to access it. It was more than just one person, because I was hearing from my clients that were homeless, that were placed in these hotels, that were also mingling with other people in these hotels. They kind of like were getting to know other people that weren't my clients. So I was kind of hearing them telling me the stories of other people that they learned about their situation. So they kind of told me the conditions of kind of what was going on there. So I got to hear about multiple types of people's situations, and there were language barriers and all types of barriers going on. Um, but I did see that, when you drove around, you didn't see the tents, you didn't see the people too much. Like, there were people still with the carts and things, living on the streets, unfortunately. But it was for multiple months. It was less, but like I'm saying, like the quality of what they were getting in these hotels, it was like it. I don't know. It sounded like it was a stressor to them, because we did have to intervene with a lot of the stuff too. It wasn't like it was like perfect. There were things going on that we were like, this is kind of like maybe intrusive, or like there was stuff that there were these weird policies and stuff. So like they didn't fully get to live like independently. There was a lot of like monitoring and like rules and stuff. But I did see, people were off the streets. They were fed. They were able to sleep somewhere. But was the quality up to par as, like, say, if I myself were to purchase a hotel room and go travel somewhere, even within the same city, and just, like, book a hotel room for, like, a week or something, I think that I would get better. It would be better for someone who's paying, versus these. I feel like the quality just wasn't good. So there were those times where that was happening, where people were getting placed. And is it better than nothing? I think it's better than being on the street. But it did seem like there were a lot of stressors that were impacting people's emotions as well, especially towards the end when people had to get into shelters or had to get out of the hotels and back onto the streets. But I think they couldn't discharge them to the street. They had to discharge them to a shelter. And a lot of people just don't like shelters for obvious reasons. So I don't know. But I did see that for multiple months, if not like nearly like a year, people were more taken care of. I don't think there were a whole lot of people that I found out about that were housed from there. That's the part that maybe bothered me the most, is that the people didn't fully get housed and cared and like directly placed, it was just like a temporary, more private version of some type of shelter, because they were more isolated from other people because they had to be distanced. But would that work? Would that work now with homeless people? I really don't know. Like, I really don't know. It's hard to say. I'm not homeless, so I can't say, but a lot of what I heard from the people during that time, it didn't sound like they were super happy about it. Maybe at first, but after a while, it seemed to have some burdens involved with it. And then from there, I mean, if I think about how would that look without a pandemic, I think that, there wouldn't be an excuse to keep people indoors, so they might not really want to do that because it might be too chaotic. Because they can't, like, if there's no mandate to stay indoors, like, how are you going to keep people in a hotel, you know what I mean? Like, they're going to be out and, like, walking off the premises and stuff. So I think because it was more contained, these sites were comfortable with it, because they weren't trying to manage people with a curfew and all these other things. Like, it was just, like, they had to stay in the hotel anyways, and they had to check in and check out. So I think they had to have permission to, like, leave. I don't know. It was complicated, but I do see that, I did see that happen for a while, to where I know something could happen with the homeless population to help them, but I don't really know, because the resources were so limited. It's like, well, we couldn't really get people easily housed from there either, because there was nothing open for them. So it was just such a complicated situation. But I think taking a version of that could potentially help, some version of that, a modern version of that, as like a transitional space to use hotels or something, either for migrants or for, citizens. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud, but I've seen a version of it work, sort of, kind of work. I think it would be up to the individual if they feel like that is better quality from what they have. Because with these types of programs and systems, they might tell you you can't drink. They might tell you can't smoke. They might tell you which days you might have to be indoors by 4 p.m., 5 p.m. You might have to be off the site every day at like 5 a.m., 6 a.m. and not be able to come back till like evening, even if you have a placement and all your stuff is like in there. So they still might you might not be able to fully stay in your room, because a lot of shelter systems are like that. You have to leave early in the morning and then you come back at night or in the evening, but early in the evening, usually around like 5 or so. So I don't know if I would want that, because sometimes you want to lounge in or like stay in on the weekend or whatever. But I get it. I mean, they don't want people there all day. They have to clean and prepare, and I mean, there are reasons why they do that. A lot of sites too, they want people out looking for work or like whatever, but it's like, it's basically a place to sleep and eat dinner and have breakfast or whatever. Like, that's basically what it is. So I'm just thinking from my own perspective, I don't know if that would be the most ideal thing, but I mean, versus staying on the streets 24/7, I don't think I'd want to do that either. So maybe it's a step up, but it's still not, you'd still have to like be without your own private place to be at, all day long, pretty much. So you're still exposed to the weather, you're still exposed to, whatever's going on in society at the time. You're just out in public all day long. But I mean, there are ways to be productive. You can be in programs, you can kind of get into employment programs and different types of programs, health programs, adult day programs and stuff, where you can kind of learn and socialize, and there's a way to kind of make a schedule for oneself. But going back to the migrants, I think I don't really know how I feel. From a humanitarian perspective, I understand why people are leaving. Like with China, how they explained that, with their housing situation, their housing crisis is different than ours. And like I tried to explain before, their lockdown was way worse and way longer, to a point where people couldn't leave their houses to get food, weren't able to get proper nutrition and food, medicine, medical care, and also weren't able to work or make an income or leave work. If they did have work, they were totally quarantined in like dorms and stuff at work. Like, I don't really know the percentages of what this looked like, but I feel like their lockdown was so severe, it impacted them so much more differently than it did for us. And I know, because I was involved in trying to do drop shipping. A lot of people who were doing drop shipping and like online sales kind of realized, I can't really do this, because all these places in China that make all this stuff aren't really able to ship it, and so we're not really able to buy it, and it's taking forever, and it slowed down business. So a lot of people who are relying on that, even for our local postal systems, I think things were slowed down. And I don't really want to harp too much on the pandemic, but I do think that everything that happened worldwide with this pandemic, or at least how the governments were handling it, with all the lockdowns and stuff, it really screwed the economy up everywhere. and the screwing up of the economy kind of brought out these different issues. So it sounds like with cartels, they got stronger. With gang violence in some of these other countries, that got stronger. They do say in China, a lot of the newly graduating students can't get work. And that's why a lot of them are trying to move, because they don't have any opportunity there for them. People who did invest all their money, because they were saying that in China, a lot of people, the way that you could get ahead was to own property. That was like one of the only ways. So people were investing in all these properties that never got fully finished. They weren't fully built and aren't going to get fully built probably. And so their money just got dumped into those sites, and they're not going to see that money again. So people lost their life savings, lost all their money that they've had saved for retirement. So that impacts people who have actually been trying to plan and save, who invested in these potential opportunities. They're not going to get that housing finished, or those companies finished, or those high rises finished, or their business buildings finished. So that might be why some of those other people are trying to buy land out here, because they can't do it there. It doesn't make sense to buy in China. Their economy is still being impacted. So is ours. But I do think that all these things going on are going to change our economy too. There's no way that it's not going to impact the Americans, because we're already impacted. We've already got so many things going on. So that's something I just don't know how to, like, what would you do, How do you deal with that? How do you manage that? How do you fix that? I really don't know what that looks like to kind of improve any of those things. So I don't know what you guys think. I feel like all these things are linked, from the pandemic situations to the ongoing homelessness situations and the growing homelessness situations, and just people not being able to kind of dig out of poverty. Even with like the Hawaii fires, Peter Santinello has a new video out where he was talking about, he was interviewing one of the firefighters who unfortunately lost his home, and just how they talk about that they still have to pay the mortgage, even though the house is completely not even there anymore. They can't even live in it. There's nothing. It's like some metal boxes that got burned, maybe the remnants of things. Everything else is just complete ashes. They can't live there. Nothing's being developed, it doesn't look like. And to me, unfortunately, I do think that they're just going to phase the people out, and other people are going to come in, bulldoze, clean up, build houses that the people who previously lived there can't afford, build on their land, and jack up the prices, and it's already not an affordable place to live, and they weren't given money enough. It's created another homelessness situation there. I guess there was some kind of a stipend of like $700, which, how far is that going to get you? Like, even the migrants that get like the $1,500, like, how far does that really get you? I mean, out here in Southern California, $1,500 for most people won't even pay your rent for 1 month. And so, if somebody gives you $1,500, you're still, if you don't pay rent with that $1,500 or any part of the rent, you're basically using that money for food, toiletries maybe. Some people, it seems like they've kind of invested it, a little bit of it at least, to kind of resell like snacks and sodas and things like that on the street, like street vendors. They're becoming street vendors and reselling stuff. I guess if they get like an EBT card or something and they're reselling for a profit, maybe. I mean, that's an idea, but it's like, it's not enough to really make ends meet. So, I don't really know. Guys. It's kind of just me brainstorming on a Sunday morning, just kind of like, what's going on? I know that our media kind of shows us a picture of what they think is going on. There's always that scare of like a militant takeover or something. Maybe that's possible, but I mean, if China has a compulsory military with their males, and it's military age males coming over, it could likely have nothing to do with military force. It might have to do with just the age range that they're at and how they want independence and opportunity. That might be what it is. Just the age ranges of people, and just maybe because they have money, because they've been working for the military, they're able to afford to get across the border, even if it's not a legal crossing. I mean, people are making opportunities where they can, and if the border's open for them to come do it, I don't know what I would do in that situation. If our situation here became as dire as it is in some of these other countries, with the violence or the lack of any kind of opportunity or way to kind of like feed yourself and your family. And I heard that Mexico or Canada had some opening in a hole in a wall or something, and I just see my friends crawling through it, and a few of my friends leave and go do it, and I find out they're not getting reprimanded and they're living in a shelter and not really living well, but it sounds like there's a possibility that they get an opportunity. Would I make that decision to leave? I mean, it's hard for me to say no, I wouldn't, I don't have the cartels controlling my money situations, at least not directly. I don't have any kind of like someone telling me what religion I can't be, or persecuting me, or monitoring what I say, and like imprisoning my family members because of speaking out about something or whatever. I don't have any of that going on in my life, so I can't really say that I wouldn't take drastic measures, especially if you see other people doing it successfully. There's a risk, but the more people do it, the more people are going to try. Who knows? Who knows if Trump is going to get into office? Who knows if it's even possible to deport people? I mean, these governments don't really want to take people back. So that's a whole other issue too, is that even if people get in trouble over here, a lot of these other governments are like, nope, sorry, they're not welcome back. And so, I don't know, there's really not that much that you can do. There really aren't that many measures you can take. But I don't know. I guess in all reality, we're just going to have to see what happens. I don't know what's going to happen, but we're going to have to see what happens and kind of go from there, because it's really hard to predict. It might just be people from other countries trying to make opportunities for themselves, because it's allowed and it's not illegal. I mean, if they're not getting imprisoned or, charged for coming through a hole in a wall or an offense or a gate or whatever, or swimming across somewhere, I don't know. I mean, there's a system in place that's promoting this. And I think these migrants aren't the same people who are buying the properties, but I think possibly the people buying the property, especially from the Chinese side, I think that they're probably trying to set up opportunities for their own people. There was this one, this is the last thing I'll say, but there was this one documentary where there were some there was like a glass factory. I don't know if it was in Michigan or where, but there was this glass factory for like car glass, for like windshields and stuff. And I think it was like I think some Chinese owners took over the place, bought it or whatever, and kind of slowly pushed out the Americans, saying, you can't have a union, you can't, you have to work overtime, you know, and the Americans were kind of like, well, we're only going to work these hours. And I guess the Chinese owners were like, the bosses were saying like, hey, the Americans, they talk too much, they're more relaxed, their productivity isn't as good as the Chinese workers, the Chinese workers are willing to work weekends and work overtime. But when interviewing one of the Chinese workers, because a lot of the Chinese workers all kind of live together, they were saying, not all of them live together, but like it would be multiple ones of them living, like sharing like an apartment or a house with other co-workers, and they were saying, they almost wished, I guess they kind of learned from the Americans, if you work one job at one place, you could technically, if you monitor how many hours and kind of if that's regulated to like a manageable amount of work, you can still get a second job or even a part-time job or a second job, and then you wouldn't have to be living with a bunch of other people and stuff like that. Like, you can make more for yourself versus working for one company that maybe just isn't treating you with full fairness. They kind of saw that there was a benefit to kind of the way that the Americans operated, but I guess eventually, the Chinese people phased out the Americans. And I'm not trying to say the Chinese, like, it's the Chinese, like, we need to be against the Chinese. I'm just saying, like, their models of work are different than what we have here. And so, I mean, that's common, though. If you've ever worked for a boss that's from another country and isn't quite, like, Americanized, you kind of see that their ideas for what you need to be doing are, like, way different. Either more relaxed or more, like, strict. The manner of, their social manners and different types of things, their way of dealing with employees, just kind of like the expectations, they're different. They're different. Until they learn the system, it's different. And they're bringing, it sounds like some of the Chinese companies are bringing some of the Chinese methods, but then they're also hiring the Chinese people. And this was before the migrant issue, I think. And so now if you take the migrant situation into account, is this what they're doing? Are they kind of setting up something for their own people because they know that there's no opportunity there, and they're setting up something for the migrants that come in, and maybe gonna try to make like a system for them to live within the American system, but making like work environments so that they can hire their own, because they seem to prefer their own Chinese ways sometimes with these companies that they open, even in history. So is that what's happening? Maybe. I mean, I would say that sounds very likely, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's all war. Who knows? But I've been rambling on and on long enough. As you can tell, I'm pretty tired. I slept in today, and it didn't help. I had a cup of coffee and a cup of yerba mate, and I'm still a little not fully refreshed, but I've gotten a little sun set outside a little bit now. I kind of wanted to get some vitamin D, so I feel a little bit better, and got some stuff to look up. But yeah, I don't know what you guys think. I try not to be like a doom and gloom thinker, but maybe this is a doom and gloom situation. We won't know until things kind of unfold more in the future. But I always try to see, like, what are the opportunities that we do have. Just like I mentioned, like, a lot of our opportunities, there are ways to level up. It might not be immediate, but there are ways to level up. There are options to leave some of these nicer areas, nice, comfortable cities, and live more rurally and live in a place where you can afford it. A lot of times there are options that we just don't want to consider. It's like, I'm struggling, but a lot of times it's like, but I don't want to make a change, you know, to change that struggle. The way I see it, you can always go back. You can always go back. I could always go back to those housemates. They'd probably take me in as a roommate again and get my old job back and live exactly how I was living. Or, move in with my parents and see what I can make on this end with some career changing and saving differences and things like that. Do I want to fully do things this way? No. But it's a risk, I mean, I can't really compare myself saying, like, okay, like, the migrants are taking risks too, but they're taking a risk too. Some of the people I know who moved out of California, out of state, they've taken a risk too. I've known a lot of people who've taken risks. Sometimes, inflation and bad economies and all that kind of stuff, you got to make the choice if you can. If that's within your power, make a choice. Am I going to consider a risk? Not like a bad risk, like not like some kind of, am I going to rob a bank kind of thing, but like, am I going to consider a risk and be uncomfortable with it? Or am I going to just stay put and try to, like, stick it out and make it work? There's still going to be costs and benefits on all sides. There are going to be costs and benefits on all sides of the cards. So, on each side of the coin. Wherever the grass looks greener, there's going to be a cost and a benefit there too. So, for all of us around the world. So, I don't know. I don't know what people think about this topic. I'm not I like to binge watch documentary content, but I'm really not that knowledgeable. So it's just food for thought. I guess we'll see what the future has in store.